Welcome back to the Berg Podcast, and for joining us today. With me today is Ford.
Hey, how's it going?
And Dan.
Hey, everybody.
And today we're talking about communication in the field. And we talked about this topic before, and the last time we talked about it, we were looking for field disciples, right? I think we were talking about, we need guys who know what's happening to speak up every once in a while. And we got some story to share and some conversation around it.
Yeah, we'll see where it goes. So the other day, Ford was out in the field, and Ford and I were having a conversation, and it just came up, and he was looking at something that was going on the job, and he was just talking about it as we talked about something completely different. Now, I'll let Ford tell the story, but the gist of it was, after I listened to what he said, I thought to myself, this is almost exactly what we're talking about. And yet here we have the leader, right? I mean, realistically, we have the one who came up with the idea to get a shovel and go dig test pits instead of going to college. And that guy who's gone everything from holding the shovel to owning a lot of equipment is sitting there and not commenting because honestly, at that point, it was because I really think he wanted to allow the people to do their job, right? Like we always talk about do your job. And in this instance, Ford realistically was an operator. He was down there so that he could run a piece of equipment. He was going to do that job. It wasn't his job to look at the operational performance or do an evaluation of how we could do this better, or somebody saying, hey, how can you VE this? He was trying to do his job. And so I said to him, Ford, but if you don't talk to them, this is almost exactly what we're talking about. If someone, it doesn't really matter who it is. If the laborer says, hey, there's a better way to do this, what about this? We want them to talk about it. And it may not be the best way. There may be a reason why you want to do that. And you can't have, things stop in production constantly. But I said, I think it's an opportunity if you want to, that you can, you can talk to him. I said, now you might let the whole day go and we proceed this way because it's multiple days worth of work, and just say, hey, get why he was thinking that, the foreman. But it was enough that I actually came and I talked to Brian. And I said, Brian, listen to what happened. Because I'll use Brian as a check a lot of times for me to say, am I reacting too quickly to this? And making a snap judgment, or do you think, are we in the same line? Ironically, when I delivered Brian the story for it, I delivered it poorly, and Brian thought I was saying something completely different than what I was saying, and he was like, hold on, wait a minute. And I was like, no, that's not what I mean. And then I re-explained it, and he was like, yeah, that is kind of similar. It wasn't as clear as it was in my head, but we talked about it a few times between us, and I thought it'd be a good topic for the podcast because it's each of our jobs to go out and try and help the team be better in any way we can with what we see and what we're capable of. And I thought this was a good opportunity to talk about it with Ford in the field.
Yeah. So Ford, tell us what happened.
What had happened was, no. So I got to the opportunity finally to go out and run some equipment the other day. And the job site, we were talking about in another podcast, by 9:00, I think we were on plan H. We had, when the foreman got us together in the morning, it's this is what we're going to do. Then the trucks didn't show up right or something. We just have to keep adapting and changing. And so Dan called me at one point, and I was like, yeah, I saw this, and this. And I was like, but, I don't, too many people in this industry have such a one way only.
Right, like my way or
the highway.
My way.
My way or my way.
My way or my way. Steve Keach.
We started singing, we got a problem here. But and so I'm always very cognizant of that that's not why I'm there. That day I was told to go help load trucks or whatever that was what I was asked to do.
Someone gave you your marching orders.
Exactly.
Go get in that machine.
They told me the wrong machine. Then I got there and oh man, I got to run that machine. It's been a while, but I didn't bang anything and didn't break anything, so I'm all right for the day. But so I'm always very reticent to make corrections in the moment because that's not why I'm there. Right. I'm there to do whatever that person that's in charge of that job is requesting of me. Labor, whatever it is that they need for that day. That's why I'm there. I'm not there to be like, oh, well, this isn't right and this isn't right or whatever it is.
How I do it.
Yeah. And I've called myself 3 times in the conversation. We were having different conversations today trying to keep adjusting the plan. And I'll be like, what about that? I'm like, listen, that's not why I'm here. I'm here. If he wants me to do it this way, we're going to do it this way. That's how it's supposed to be. But the thing was at the end of the day, we had a little time to chat. And I think it's more about what we're really talking about is the delivery of the conversation. It's not about the conversation and how it happened. It's about the delivery because, he passed on that in his past, he had brought up some things to somebody, and then when he disagreed with somebody, all of a sudden that person didn't
Felt
want
like you were on the short list or something, right?
got the
Like
target
you
on his
got the-
back or
yeah,
whatever the
yeah.
conversation was.
You
and it
don't
was
want to
like,
disagree. You want to, yeah.
right.
Mhm.
And it's like, no, that's part of allowing that is to, ask questions, not like do it this way. It's more of like, hey, what were you thinking there?
Mhm.
Did you think about this other option, or did you think about this? Or, and there's always, 20 reasons behind why something's happened that you're not aware of, but it's always easier than I know it's better or I can do it differently type of thing. Because when we started the day, we were trying to haul some material out. And then we realized in the middle of the day that actually there's an area that is not structural, that we could actually possibly use some of that particular material and haul a different pile out that was in the way more. And so we had to just flip and adjust and make it work better.
Mhm.
And they made the adjustments, and it was just interesting that Dan was like, well, hey, talk to him at the end of the day. Cause I was like, I'm not going to interrupt. He has a plan. He's trying to execute on his plan. He's doing a good job on that. But also I had the benefit of, I was there for one day.
Right.
I didn't have the whole flow. I didn't have the information. So it's very difficult to jump in and instill yourself at a point like that. And so and then Dan was like, well, do this. And I was like, oh, okay. But I was trying to figure out like how I'm only seeing that snapshot. So it's hard to insert yourself when you're, oh, we're going to do this. And then it turns out that there's a reason why something was being done.
Yeah, for sure.
And I didn't want to slow down by like asking why is it being done either.
And I got to imagine that, in your position here, you feel a little too close to the fire sometimes, right? Like how is that perceived if the owner jumps in and starts telling a guy he should do something different, right? 'Cause you don't want it to. You're not trying to make it a my way or the highway situation. You think you're passing on some advice or some experience that you've had, but you don't want a guy to say, "Oh, well, that's the gospel. I got to do it that way every time because that's what Ford told me one time," right?
Right.
Yeah.
You want to allow for creativity. You want to allow for, they might have found a better way. It's just more of observing and trying to, hey, have you tried this? Now, if someone comes to you and asks you a question, it's easier to do that. But, like there was nothing wrong with what they were doing. It's just that I was there, saw a snapshot and go, oh, maybe we could do something a little bit differently.
Yeah.
And it was how to extol that to somebody without coming off. It's all about the delivery. That's what, boils back to every time, because if it's done in a way, or, at the end of the day, that guy, that foreman was actually telling me how him and another foreman actually talk a lot because the other foreman doesn't know certain things. So it's cool to hear that they're like talking between each other and communicating and helping each other out. And then I found out that, some of the material was put there for a particular reason. So like, you just don't know everything, but asking the questions is always a disarming way of getting the information needed.
Yeah. It's funny. We talk a lot about communication. I feel like we talk a lot about communication, at least the three of us, and sometimes on this podcast. And I took like a communications class in college, right? And it sounds like potentially a time waster, but because who doesn't know how to communicate? But one of the most interesting things I got out of that class was, and Dan, you and I talk about this a lot, but was the message intended, the message received, right? And if you look at if you were to draw a chart, a blueprint for communication, the number of things that cause noise in communication, body language, circumstance, environment, intonation, all of these things that get in the way potentially of someone hearing the message you were intending to deliver. And you're absolutely right. The delivery is crucial. I got a young man. So I've talked about it before. I coach high school lacrosse. Got a young man on my team, tremendous athlete, very knowledgeable, and he should be a captain, but he's terrible at the delivery. He knows exactly what he's saying. He knows exactly what to do. But in the moment, he'll snap at you. He'll turn around and he'll tell a kid he didn't do his job, or tell a kid why what he thought was his job was wrong. And I tell him all the time, I'm like, man, you're going to be a tremendous leader if you can figure out how to deliver the message, because people know you know how to do this and they're willing to follow you as long as you don't bite their head off when they do it wrong. So,
Right.
yeah.
The couple things that I get from the conversation as we're as we're talking about is one is Ford said it a couple times there, and for some of the guys who are newer and don't interact with Ford as much, you go back to 8-10 years ago, and everybody saw Ford every day. We were just talking about it today. We were running around. We had to go run somewhere, and Ford and I were saying, you remember the days when we would just drive in circles all day, see everybody together, separate, And
it's because there was only 2 job sites at that point.
No, it was still everywhere to us at that point. But and even since then, Ford is always asking questions. And Brian and I know that because we deal with Ford every day. And Ford doesn't tell you what to do. He asks you a question, and the question is really to try and find out what you're thinking. But if you're going to be equal parts involved in the conversation, it's important that you listen to the question he's asking you, especially for me, who's quick to respond, because I'll just give him an answer. And I didn't even think about what his question was. I just gave him, now he's got the answer, and I didn't even have time to think about why he asked me the question. You know what I mean? So that's one thing that I took away from it. And then the other is how, you're sort of talking about the kid on your team. And the other thing is I had something else myself this week where I thought I had the best idea ever. And I talked to the appropriate people. I communicated effectively. I did everything I thought I should do, except it wasn't complete. It was, it was the issue that I have at times, which is I want to move so quickly that I don't actually check all the boxes that I would need to be sure that it's going to work the way I want it to. So I had, that sort of an issue. And it's why communication is so important. And then you tack on top of that modern society with technology and how we communicate. And you hit on it about all the finer points of communication is one of the reasons I don't text if it's serious, because I can't read the conversation. Like all I'm getting is exactly the words you sent me with no context. Yeah. So I don't know if you're upset or you're angry or you're nervous or you're anything. I don't know anything about your emotions. Mm-hmm. I don't know I don't know what your situation is. Anytime you can have a face-to-face conversation, for me, it's always better. And I say it more and more now, like I'm just old and I have to accept that. And times have changed, but I don't like texting back and forth. If I text, it's just because of convenience. I'm just trying to get you a message. I can't talk right now. Tell me what you need and then I'll get back to you. But there's so much more gain from an honest conversation that you have face to face with somebody. And there is so much value in so many of our team members that I just hope we have the opportunity and they have the opportunity to deliver to the younger kids. Yeah. Because the younger kids want to know.
And it's something interesting you said there about like the texting versus the talking to somebody. And I don't know. And maybe it's personality driven, but I think it might be human nature to assume the worst, right? And that's probably a character trait. But like someone delivers a message through text and you translate it with a certain tone of voice. You translate it with an intonation. You have a feeling about what they're trying to say, and you could be totally misconstrued because of your interpretation of how it's coming across. So, yeah.
Well, I mean, I know that with texting, like I always tell people, if they send me more than like 3 sentences, I'm not even reading it, because like that's a conversation. Like the other day, I was out in the field again, and I was like, someone texted me, and I was running a piece of equipment, so I like call them back. They're like, "What?" I was like, I'm not responding. Like, I'm calling you because we can talk about this, but I can't text right now because I'm doing something else. And it's like, it's a wonderful tool for certain particular things, but when it's a message that is more intricate, it's important to do it in a different format.
Yeah, I don't think it was designed to be a method of having a conversation, right? I think it was like a quick, like, hey, I need for you to know something, or
report to job X at 10 a.m. That's what it is. Not like,
right. I was going to say the same thing. Yeah. That you go back to, was it Twitter? What's the original one that you only had a certain amount of characters?
Twitter, 140 characters,
Twitter,
right?
141,
whatever it was, but sort of that thing. But another thing that's messed with that, at least for me personally, is
emojis.
Emojis. I don't use a lot of emojis.
Oh man,
we're not going down that road. I don't even know what they mean. It's too dangerous.
And certainly don't combine emojis.
No,
yeah, that's a dangerous game you're playing.
We were. Well, you sidetracked me. Tim Raptor is Tim. So Tim is Alco, and he's been asking me about some money for a payment, but it's just retainage that he wants. And so he sent me a thing that said and it was asked me about the money with 2 money bags. So just to be difficult, I texted him back because we had made one payment because some money was released. And I said, in your terms, I guess that means, and it was $1 back because it was just half the money. So we'll
Half
see
the
what he
money.
thinks about the half the money.
Yeah.
But no, what I was going to say is voice recognition also has messed with it because now that I'm in the vehicle on the Android Auto or Apple Auto, and so it it reads the text to you, and then you just hit the button. Do you want to reply? You just say yes.
Yeah.
And then you just start talking, and all of a sudden it replies back. It reads me back what I said, and I was like, "That's not a text. Like, that's not even. I don't leave voicemails, and that's a voicemail."
Yeah. Right.
So then I end up just like hitting cancel. I'm like, I'll get back to you. But to Ford's point, it's become something that I think you said it that it wasn't intended for.
Yeah. I don't.
And
think
then
it was. Yeah.
you just get lost, and it's made it very difficult. And you combine that with we haven't talked about COVID in a while, but you combine that with COVID and how everybody got isolated, and to a point, people forgot how to communicate face to face effectively. That was a very quick change that impacted us, I think, significantly. And it's taken a little bit to get back to people, even if you take it the complete other way. If you received a text from me and you just read it, and the last time you and I talked, we were on really good terms, we had no issues, you were happy, and I sent you a text, and you could think like, oh yeah, Dan wants to talk about that tomorrow. But if I was here and I was angry about it, you'd know. You know what I mean? And so I think that that's the problem we've had too, is that as people have gotten back into the workforce and new people have come in, especially the younger kids who were subject to some of that shutdown period, they don't really know how to deal with people talking to them, or they feel like they talk at them when really, they're just, it's an adjustment where they have to get used to, and that plays right along with what we always talk about with the generation gap. When you have some of our most senior foremen who were raised a certain way, and then the youngest guys who were raised a different way, and they're just not used to how the older guys talk. You know what I mean? Just how they, what their expectation and their treatment. So, but I thought it was a valid point that I wanted to make sure we got out there, because there's almost nothing more important in what we do than communication. If you want to boil it down to the simplest things, if you want to make sure you don't end up getting injured on a construction site, you have to be able to communicate effectively with the people around you, because there's large equipment that you could either run the equipment into each other, or a person, or a space that you shouldn't be, or a power line or something else. So from the very point of just being able to operate, you got to be able to communicate, all the way to actually being able to communicate between the group to say like, this is the best way to do this. I mean, when you see a pipe crew is usually a really good example. Landfills, when they're doing like exposure of tie-ins, is another one. When you see these guys in a 100,000-pound excavator peeling back dirt, or a smaller one, 40,000-pound excavator peeling back dirt on a liner, and two guys with shovels, and they're all using hand signals so that this guy doesn't rip a 60 millimeter thick liner that's been there for 30 years. Like, that's a pretty crazy level of communication, and yet sometimes we're able to do that, but we're not able to just say, like, the laborer doesn't feel comfortable to say like, hey, I get what we're doing here, but did you think about this? Because he's the one with the shovel that sees the actual result, and that happens a lot. Pipe crews is another place that can happen.
Yeah.
Well,
you think? Yeah, sorry. Go ahead, Ford.
No, well, two things I was going to add to that. One is that the interesting thing with this was that there was nothing going wrong. It was just going different than what I saw in my snapshot, right? And so there was nothing he was doing that was incorrect. If there's something terribly wrong, or something unsafe, that's a different, that's a timeout, stop, we got to have the conversation. But this was more about just trying to understand the project, understand what's going on. And then the other day, I went to another job site, and I was there, and the two cool things happened for me. One was the client's representative caught my ear, and he was just having a conversation about nothing. Just, he's sitting there all day, so he wants to talk. And it was cool because everybody kept doing what they were doing. They didn't need to stop. They just kept doing what they're doing. And then at the end of the day, we got there, and they, were shutting down. And the group of guys that were on the job site were just having a conversation about nothing, but just having fun, joking with each other, talking about, places in town or different things. And I think there was about 20 minutes of time where they had gotten their work done for the day, and they just had a little conversation that wasn't like tied to tomorrow's schedule. It wasn't tied to, it was just having a general conversation. And, that was a fun time because it was like no stress. There was just catching up, saying hi, that kind of thing. And it was neat to do because a lot of times when we get to go out in the field, we're in the middle of the day and we're trying not to interrupt whatever's going on. Like, we'll wave, say hi, shake some hands, but we're not able to be like, hey, but I was able to be there at the end of the day, and it was just having that little, like, those guys were talking, just listen to them, maybe bust each other's chops or make a joke. And it was just kind of a neat little experience.
Yeah. Made me think of something when we were talking there. Two things. I'll probably forget the second by the time I'm done, but I know we've talked before, Ford, and like you didn't start an excavation company because you wanted to run an excavation company. You started an excavation company because you loved doing the excavation, right? You love being in the machines by the most part, right? Do you
I'm gonna say yes.
and you look for, I think in the past and today still, you look for opportunities where you can jump into a machine, you can do what it is you like to do about the business. And I was curious if you're concerned ever, about the way you come off or what people perceive of like the owner being at their site in a machine. Does it ever like occur to you or dissuade you from wanting to go to sites?
I don't think it dissuades me. I actually went to another job and something else cool happened there. I'll get to it in a second, but I don't think it dissuades me. I like try and do it to show that, like, because, depending on, I don't know where the people came from. I don't know. Maybe they came from a huge company where
Yeah.
the executives never were involved and stuff like that. And so I'd rather be there with them than not that way. But I went to another job site the other day, and here's where communication was really good. I was talking to an operator about the job, and it's a small project, but he knew all about the job. Like, he was talking about it. So his foreman had communicated it to him enough that him and I had like a 20-minute conversation. He's like, well, this is happening here, and this is going to happen there, and this is over here. So there had been communication there. And then actually it was funny because then I had the same conversation with his foreman, but I already knew the information. Like, it was like a repeat of the same information, but there had been enough conversation and enough communication that this guy was comfortable in knowing what was happening and going to happen on that project, even though he wasn't in charge of it. He was just operator. And that was a really good example of how it had been shared appropriately.
Yeah. He was in the know. I mean, because he'd been communicated to and heard the message, right? Yeah, which is important. I had the other thing I was thinking about is I had lunch with a friend recently, and his wife is a restaurateur, and he was talking about how much he would say like, hey, we should go to the restaurant, have dinner, and she doesn't want to go. And you were mentioning there, like, you got to enjoy that moment at the end of the day because it was sort of casual conversation. It didn't have to be about work, and they weren't asking you questions about what's going on. You weren't, feeling like you had to figure out what was happening with the job. And she was saying she can't go to the places and eat because she sees too many things happening, or everyone wants to talk about work, that she can't just be like casual in that environment. So it was cool to hear sort of the reverse of that, right? You had a moment there. You get to be out on site and you get to experience like not only the thing that you love doing, but people enjoying it for the sake of the camaraderie, being next to each other, as opposed to only worrying about the thing that's at hand.
Yeah, and I think, that job site in particular, I knew a lot of the guys because some of them have been here a long time. Some of them, step up at different times during snow and stuff. So I get to see some of those. Sometimes the job sites are, people I don't get to know. And then another job site, I saw a young guy, I think he only had 3 days in, and he was doing a labor task. And I was watching him like just through the windshield, and he stuck to it. And it was really cool to see. Like, it was not a glamorous job. He was literally, I think, cleaning out silt fence.
Mm-hmm.
But I did not see him stop for at least, I think it was an hour plus. It might have been 2 hours, but he was just doing his job, and he was not, on his phone. He wasn't coming back every 10 minutes to ask if he was done. He just kept going until he was done. And it was great to see someone just sticking to it. And so, kudos to him for he doesn't have a lot of experience. He doesn't have a lot of industry knowledge yet, but what he was told he was to do, he did it. And so that was really a neat thing to see as well, just that somebody, wanted to learn as what they were up to.
Yeah, that's cool for sure.
No, I mean, I gladly always will get back out in the machine. That is definitely, I always, the joke, you always have your elevator pitch. We always joke with people, and it's like, yeah, I started to do this so that I could pull levers, and now I'm a keyboard cowboy. Like, that's what my role is at this point. That's
Sure.
where
Yeah.
I'm needed, but
Right.
I'd much rather be pulling levers if it was up to me.
That's probably a good place to wrap it up. But thanks for joining us today, folks. We hope you got something from this, and we hope you come back for another episode.